Welcome, Katie. Floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you. That was great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. So the organizers were really adamant that tonight not just be depressing, but be inspiring and give people hope. Oh, I'm glad you're already laughing. Okay. So I know it's funny, right, to think of something on this topic being inspiring. But in that vein, I want to start off tonight with actually a game. Okay, so this game is called Who Said It? Donald Trump or Noam Chomsky? Okay, so let's see how everyone does. Ready? Okay. Who said the following? Ready? And in some cases, I'm not going to quote verbatim, because if I quote verbatim, it's too obvious from the style of talking. So it'll either be a quote or it'll be a summary of what they said, okay? So who said the U.S. won't sanction Saudi Arabia over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi because that would jeopardize billions in arms sales to Saudi Arabia? Raise your hand if you think it's Trump. Okay, Chomsky? All right, it was Trump. And not only was it Trump, but he was saying it about himself. He was explaining why he wouldn't sanction Khashoggi. Okay, let's see what's next. We left troops behind in Syria for the oil. Okay, who says Trump? Okay, Chomsky? Trump. Okay, good one. All right. Who said in response to claims of Russian interference in U.S. presidential elections, who said in response to that, the U.S. has interfered in the elections of many other nations? Chomsky? Trump. Chomsky. Okay, who said the Iraq war sunk America's prestige? Chomsky? Trump. Chomsky. Who said there are a lot of killers? What do you think? Our country's so innocent? Trump? Chomsky? Trump. That was Trump. Okay. And who responded to the claim that the only one who wants the war to continue is Hamas? Who responded to that claim by saying, actually, Israel is the one who wants the war to continue? Trump, okay. Chomsky? Trump, okay. So the reason that we can even play this game of who said it, Donald Trump or Chomsky, is because they do have something in common. They state inconvenient truths. And there are a few differences, obviously, starting with the fact that when he's not stating inconvenient truths, Donald Trump is lying pathologically and rather creatively and flagrantly. Also, they have a totally different value system, right? So let's go back to one of the earlier quotes I did about how Israel wants the war to go on. That was actually taken during the one and only debate of 2024 between Trump and Biden. Biden said the only one who wants the war to continue is Hamas, and Trump said, actually, Israel is the one. But he finished that sentence. The full sentence was, actually, Israel is the one, and you should let them finish the job. So there he has it. He's critical of Israel in a weird way, or maybe he's praising Israel according to his moral values. Obviously, Chomsky would have shared that same observation about Israel wanting the war to go on, but would use that to then argue why Israel should not be funded by the United States, right? He also, by the way, I should bring up one other thing that Trump said that really resonated during the debate, which was at the end, Joe Biden said something, and Trump said, I really don't know what he said. I don't think he knows either. So at that moment, we were all Trump. Okay. But back to the Trump-Chomsky game. I don't bring it up to taint Chomsky as Trumpian. It's not to praise Trump as Chomskyan. It's not to make some lazy horseshoe theory-based observation about how the left and right meet each other. And it's not to argue that Trump isn't an imperialist or that Chomsky is. And also, I'm not an accelerationist. I'm not arguing that it's a good thing Trump was elected. I don't believe it won't get better until it gets worse. I'm saying that a silver lining of Trump's presidency is that he's laying bare the brutality of American imperialism, a brutality the Democrats tried to conceal. And so we should take advantage of that. Now, as disgusting as it is, thank you. As disgusting as it is for Trump to announce plans to open a Riviera on the Gaza Strip, isn't it nice to hear someone admit that our foreign policy, when I say our, I'm talking as American, our foreign policy isn't driven by a commitment to fairness, justice, and the rules-based order? Isn't it helpful to know that there is, in fact, no rules-based order? Isn't it helpful to not pretend that the US funds and enables Israel because it's a democracy? Another example is Ukraine. So people are scandalized that Trump spoke to Zelensky like a petulant, ungrateful, uncooperative, and self-sabotaging child, which he did. But isn't that in some ways preferable to what Biden did? Biden may have said nice things about Zelensky, but what did he actually do? He dangled NATO membership in front of him while knowing full well that was never a possibility. He claimed to care about Ukrainian sovereignty and self-determination while sending Boris Johnson to tell Zelensky not to negotiate with Putin 1 month into the war. Had they done that, the war would be over by now, thousands of people would be alive, and Ukraine would, of course, have more land than they will ever have now. It's also worth noting, by the way, that 52% of Ukrainians want a negotiated settlement. So when people say listen to Ukrainians, you should find out which Ukrainians they're talking about. Trump speaks crudely and cruelly of natural minerals in Ukraine, but if the US is going to exploit Ukraine, isn't it better that Americans know what the war is really about? And isn't it better for Ukrainians to know what the US is really prioritizing? And now, another thing I want to thank Trump for is bringing Elon Musk into the forefront, because like Trump, he's exposing things, right? So first of all, this guy literally comes out with a chainsaw to demonstrate how he wants to cut the welfare state. Which, again, that would be like a parody. Like, that's something the left would say about him to criticize him, but he actually does it. That's how out of touch he is. Also, it was great when he gave the Nazi salute, not because I'm a fan of the Nazi salute, but because it was so great at exposing the absolute bankrupt hypocrisy and rank hypocrisy of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, which claims to combat anti-Semitism, but really creates anti-Semitism by suggesting that they're not clapping for anti-Semitism, they're clapping for calling it out by suggesting that being Jewish and being Zionist are the same thing. I mean, maybe it's like a bad sign when your talking points are shared by the KKK. Because think about the people who use the term Zionist and Jewish interchangeably, right? It's like David Duke types, real neo-Nazis, and then, of course, the ADL and AIPAC and Israel. Okay, politics makes strange bedfellows. Anyway, so when Elon Musk gave that salute, what was so great about it was that the ADL had to defend him. The ADL said that it wasn't actually that problematic. People were on edge. People need to calm down. People were being too sensitive. But it was totally kosher. My word, not theirs at the end. But basically, I paraphrased. So that was useful because it laid bare what despicable people the ADL are. Now, I also liked it because it brought out Steve Bannon. And he did another salute. But the reason I like Steve Bannon is because he makes me feel really special, because he said that the number one enemy are Jews who are critical of Israel, American Jews who are critical of Israel. So I was kind of blushing. Yeah. Yeah. How much time? When did I start? I forgot to check the starting time. Sorry about this. All right. So the other good thing about this is that people are seeing through the Dems. They're waking up to the fact that the Democrats did not fight against Trump. They don't really want to fight against Trump in the way he needs to be fought against. They are feckless. They care more about defeating someone like Bernie Sanders than defeating someone like Donald Trump. And, you know, people are waking up to that. The numbers, like Democrat voters have very low opinions right now of Democrats in Congress. Now, to be fair, I have to mention these people. There are some people who are truly awful, who continue to blame third-party voters for giving us Trump, taunt Palestinian Americans for staying home or voting third party. They refer to them as Dearborn voters. They tell us that people are self-indulgent practitioners of purity politics who needed to do whatever it took to stop Trump. Well, if people needed to do whatever was needed to defeat Trump, shouldn't that have included Kamala Harris? Because for a year and a half, a significant and vocal portion of the Democratic Party electorate and their progressive base organized, begged, and demonstrated for the party to change its policy of blanket diplomatic support for Israel and curtail extraordinary lengths to arm an active genocide in Gaza. The polls showed this would have helped her numbers. Was it not self-indulgent and Trump enabling of her to ignore the base and instead run around with Liz Cheney and brag about getting an endorsement from war criminal Dick Cheney? And by the way, a YouGov IMEU poll showed that 29% of voters nationally who voted for Biden in 2020 and cast a ballot for someone besides Kamala Harris in 2024 did that because ending Israel's violence in Gaza was the top issue affecting their vote choice. So again, Kamala Harris should have been listening to her base. Remember, the person running is supposed to earn the votes, right? It's not the other way around. Another thing that's positive is that people are seeing through the media. So more than 75,000 subscribers have canceled their Washington Post subscription since Jeff Bezos announced he would only promote free market and libertarian ideals. Another example, thank you for saying the quiet part out loud, Jeff. Again, that's like a critique that you would make of him, Yanis, but he's saying it about himself. Also, MSNBC viewership is really low. And, I do want to say how disgusting Western media has been on Gaza. I actually learned this kind of firsthand. I mean, my experience was not that bad, and it certainly pales in comparison to Melanie's, which you'll hear about shortly. But I made a video at an outlet called The Hill. I wrote a monologue saying that Israel was an apartheid state, and for that, I got fired. And even though there was really nothing you can say, because the video pointed out how many people, including the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, and including former Israeli prime ministers, were calling it apartheid state. But people are seeing through the media because the media is just an arm of the state, not only of the United States, but of Israel. And one of the most, I think, disgusting examples of this was the way that rape was reported on. So the Western media was totally complicit in this narrative of a mass rape, coordinated mass rape, systemic mass rape committed by Hamas, they claimed. All of the witnesses walked it back. All of the witnesses were debunked. No one was saying, this wasn't an issue of Believe Women, because no one was saying it happened to them. Now, this same media who covered that story and never retracted it decided to ignore the fact that it was documented that Palestinians were raped. I mean, this was covered by Israeli media, and somehow Western media never covered it. This isn't you don't even have to go to Haaretz. This was centrist and right-wing media that covered this. This was sexual assault captured on video. And this is something that you actually had a member of the Knesset. They were debating whether or not to arrest people who had raped Palestinian prisoners. That's what the debate was about. There were protests when they started to arrest soldiers, but the protests weren't about the rapes. The protests were about arresting them. And you actually had a member of the Knesset being asked rhetorically, so is it legitimate to insert sticks into people's rectums? And a member of the Knesset said, yes, it's legitimate. Why wasn't that story all over Western media? Why don't the people who claim to care about rape and sexual violence talking about that? So you have to remember this, that the media is totally untrustworthy when it comes to this issue especially, and they don't care about Palestinian lives. But, luckily, it's becoming harder and harder to paint the pro-Palestine movement as anti-Semitic. It's becoming harder and harder to conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. And again, I'd like to remind people that to suggest that conflation is anti-Semitic, and it's the old dual loyalty trope, which is that all Jews are a monolith and we're all loyal to Israel. I think it's undermined by the fact that you have people like so many Jews protesting the war in Gaza, but it's also undermined when you see the state, which claims to care about Jewish safety, do things like arrest Jewish students who are protesting. That's something that unites the whole Western world, right? So you see that happening in the United States. You see that happening in Germany with Yanis, but also where you had Udi Az, who was wearing a yarmulke and got thrown down the stairs by German police. You see that when you have literal Holocaust survivors like Stephen Kaposh, who's being questioned by the police for protesting for Palestinian rights. You see that in London when you have someone like Haim Brashith, who's the son of Holocaust survivors, an Israeli, arrested for saying that Israel was not going to be able to defeat Hamas. So all of these things are being laid bare. And I want to just end off by quoting someone, because the real inspiration comes from so many different struggles that are so interconnected. But I know a lot of people are like, oh, what can give us hope, or how do we keep going? And I feel like hope actually is a discipline and a choice. And we owe it to the world to keep it. I understand losing hope, but we have to keep reinventing it. And people here probably know who Rafat Al-Arir is. He was a poet and professor in Gaza. Yeah. He wrote a beautiful poem called If I Must Die. And he was murdered by Israel. He was targeted. This was not a random, it wasn't just a random war crime, it was a targeted one. His sister's apartment building was struck, but it was just the sister's apartment because they knew he was there. So they didn't take out the whole building, they just took that one out because they wanted to kill him. And they wanted to kill him because this poet spoke out against Israel's genocide. And he and I were corresponding a couple of months before he was killed. I asked him, what can we do? What can we do in the West? And he said, thank you for offering more pressure on the media, more coverage, more Palestinian voices, more protests. Hopefully Israel is curbed ASAP. And so that is the message that I want to leave you with. More pressure on the media, more coverage, more Palestinian voices, more protests. And hopefully Israel is curbed ASAP. And no matter what happens, we have to keep doing those things.